Why will the Broncos quarterback room look different in 2025? Well, obviously not Bo Nix, but it's the backups. Mace here with a brain dump to talk about the backup quarterback situation as free agency nears because, of course, Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson, they have expiring contracts. So the most harmonious quarterback room in the NFL may not look the same as you go into the 2025 season. I say the most harmonious quarterback room in the league because Bo Nix, Jarrett Stidham, and Zach Wilson, from the fire of a competition that lasted through the spring and then into the summer, through the start of camp until Zach Wilson fell out of first team reps, and then through training camp, lingering with Nix and Stidham, continuing to get first team reps, splitting them until you got to the preseason games and Nix took control. It created a situation that could have gotten heated, but it didn't. Those quarterbacks actually bonded to the point where when the Broncos season ended, the three quarterbacks, their significant others, joined by Mike McGlinchey and his wife, went off for a postseason vacation together. That's pretty cool that after spending all that time together during the season, they got away together. Bo Nix's wife, of course, posted some photos of the quarterbacks and their significant others, and of course, McGlinchey and his wife together during that vacation, and posted on Instagram another photo during the holidays as well of the quarterbacks and their companions together. So it's really cool to see how they came together. The personalities fit. Bo Nix becoming the leader of that group. Jarrett Stidham, a very popular guy in the locker room. We saw this late in the 2023 season when he was elevated to the starting quarterback role in place of Russell Wilson, how the locker room rallied around him. The thing that you see when you're in the locker room on a regular basis, even for just those 30 to 45-minute bursts during the week, you see players interacting, and Jarrett Stidham is one of those guys that just interacts with the entire team, really has a lot of friends on that team. Guys gravitate to him, a fun personality, makes a lot of jokes, just really good guy to be around. And then Zach Wilson, who sort of got the year of QB rehab, football rehab, as John Elway used to call it. He fit right in that room as the number 3 quarterback. It was a harmonious trio, and it's going to break up in all likelihood because both Stidham and Zach Wilson, they're good enough to be number 2s. And realistically, it would be a shock if they don't have opportunities to at least be a number 2 somewhere. Zach Wilson in particular, because this year that he spent under Sean Payton might give him a chance to at least compete for maybe a bridge starting quarterback role somewhere. Of course, it's a real limited draft class at the top of the draft. You may only have 2 first-round quarterbacks in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Perhaps Jackson Dart sneaks into the first round, but I'd say probably still more likely that he doesn't. Maybe Quinn Ewers, you hear rumblings that he could be rising up some boards, that maybe he's a little bit higher than the draft bus, as Sean Payton would refer to, may have him. But even so, you're looking at a situation where not every team that maybe wants to address the quarterback position in the draft is going to be able to, or even chooses to, because they may look at this class and say, go in another direction, which could open up some opportunities for Zach Wilson. And then there's Jarrett Stidham. Now, let's just rewind back on Jarrett Stidham to last August. There was this comment in the locker room, and when it hit social media, it created a firestorm. I want to replay it because I didn't think there was anything bad that Jarrett Stidham said here. This was after the preseason finale, his first chance to answer questions since being told that he was not going to be the starting quarterback for the Denver Broncos in 2024.
I mean, first of all, obviously I was very disappointed, I know I'm a starting quarterback in this league. I have zero doubts about that. And, it just didn't shake out my way. Um, but I know what kind of player I am, kind of person I am. And like I said earlier, I'll be ready to go if I need to be. And, yeah, like I said, I have no doubts that I'm a starting caliber quarterback in this league.
Okay. First of all, I like the confidence that still existed in Jarrett Stidham, even though he lost the job. But he said other things about supporting Bo Nix. He talked there about being ready. Like a backup's job is to be ready in case he has to step in. And a stat that I'll throw at you here, and it shows why the Broncos' backup choice is so important here, is that in the last 3 seasons of the 96 seasons that teams have played in those 3 years, 32 teams, 3 seasons, 32 times 3, 96. Of those 96 seasons, 47 have seen teams have to start their backup quarterback at some point due to injury. We're not counting, for example, Carson Wentz starting for Patrick Mahomes in week 18 because the Chiefs had clinched everything there was to clinch in the AFC. That is for strictly injury. So, for example, we're not counting Russell Wilson getting benched for Jarrett Stidham back late in the 2023 season. So, 47 out of 96, that's just a tick under 50%. Odds are you're going to need that backup at some point, and the Broncos haven't been among those nearly half the teams in the last 2 seasons to need a backup because of injury. They were back in 2022 when Russell Wilson missed a couple of games and Brett Rippon started for him. So odds are you're going to need that backup at some point. It's an important choice. Jarrett Stidham, to his credit, was ready all year, ready if needed. But you listen to him and those comments back in August. He says he still sees himself as a starting quarterback. But might he find the streets a little cold in terms of potentially being a starting quarterback? That is fair to ask because you have another draft class coming in. And frankly, if a team is looking at those 4 to 7 year veterans who might have something left in the tank to something untapped, kind of like Sean Payton had when he brought in Teddy Bridgewater in 2018 in New Orleans, when he brought in Jameis Winston in 2020, also in New Orleans. Are you more likely to go with Wilson or Stidham if you're another team? Probably going to be Wilson, which could basically mean that the best option for Stidham may be back in Denver. That may not be a bad thing, though. Either way, the Broncos, they're probably not keeping this room together, but I think it's essential they keep one of these quarterbacks because experience does matter for a Sean Payton backup. And certainly experience has really helped Sean Payton backups over the years, particularly in New Orleans. Let's just go back to his time with the Saints and look at some of the backup quarterbacks that he had there. Okay, so I mentioned Teddy Bridgewater, who came aboard in 2018. He started a throwaway game at the end of the 18 season, but then early in 2019, Drew Brees got injured. He had to come in. The Saints were 5-0 with Bridgewater, who did well enough to turn that into a starting gig and most importantly, a starter's contract with Carolina the following year. So Bridgewater moves on. Jameis Winston comes in 2020. Now, Taysom Hill is actually the guy who starts when Drew Brees misses 4 games that year. The Saints go 3-1 with Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill's been around for more than a few minutes. 2021, Drew Brees retires. Jameis Winston's the starter. Taysom Hill is a backup. Jameis Winston does well. The Saints are 5-2 in the games that he starts. He tears his ACL in week 7. Now, Trevor Siemian comes in, but there's an asterisk on this. Taysom Hill was dealing with injuries. At the time that Jameis Winston got injured, Taysom Hill was coming off of a concussion. So the next option was Simeon, who ends up starting. Taysom Hill eventually comes back in and starts games for the Saints. And I mention this because when Taysom Hill, the primary backup, starts for the Saints in 2021, they go 4-1. When it's Trevor Simeon and Ian Book, options 3 and 4, they go 0-5. If you have quarterback 3 and 4, you're hard pressed to be able to do anything particularly well. That's something that's pretty tough unless you're the Browns pulling Joe Flacco a couple of years back off the scrap heap and getting something out of him. So you take those, you add in Luke McCown, a veteran backup coming in 2015 for the game for a game for the Saints. He plays well, but the Saints lose to the Panthers. And then you throw in Jarrett Stidham when he steps in at the end of 2022. And that's 17 games that Sean Payton has had as a head coach with backup quarterbacks, not counting throwaway games at the end of 2018, at the end of 2009, started by Teddy Bridgewater and Mark Brunell, respectively. The record of Sean Payton teams in those games, 13-4. This shows why it's important to get the backup right. It's important and why Sean Payton gets his reward for placing a priority on it, and why the choice is so important, and why Jarrett Stidham, if he comes back, and I know people may be shuddering, oh, Stiddy, it may not be so bad. In fact, he might do well in year 3 in the scheme. Zach Wilson, does he probably have more upside? Yeah, which is probably why he's going to be more in demand in free agency next week. But if the Broncos run it back with Stiddy and he settles in as a long-term understudy number 2 to Bo Nix, this isn't the worst thing. It may actually work out pretty well and could work out where if he has to step in for multiple games, maybe you are talking about 3-1. And real quick, I mentioned Taysom Hill in this, the Saints going 7-2 in games started by Taysom Hill at quarterback when Sean Payton was there. Taysom Hill coming off of an ACL. Of course, there's rumblings the Saints are going to move on from him. He's going to be a cap casualty. The Saints in cap hell, as they pretty much always are, as they always seem to be, just because that's the way they run things down there. So Taysom Hill had that ACL injury in early December, suffered it in week 13. So between being 34 years old, having the injury late in the season, you're talking about a rehab process for Taysom Hill that is likely going to extend into the 2025 season. And even then, you know how with an ACL injury, sometimes it can be a little bit more than that before the player is all the way back. So while Taysom Hill, I wrote about this at denversports.com, somebody who on a per play basis is still as efficient as ever in terms of his success rate, in terms of making things happen, that rehab timetable probably means you're not looking at him being a potential gadget / backup quarterback option at this time. Now, he may sit there on the market for a while, and perhaps if his rehab goes well, assuming the Saints do choose to make him a cap casualty, perhaps that's something where the Broncos and Sean Payton circle back on Taysom Hill as you get into the season to see. But as far as potentially reuniting with Sean Payton and being a backup quarterback option as he was a few years ago, that's something that I don't really see as realistic at this time. So I think the focus is Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson, one or the other. I'd be shocked beyond belief if both are back, because each is going to have the opportunity to be at minimum a clear number 2 somewhere. And for Zach Wilson, of course, number 2 would be a step up from where he was last year after the football rehab. And then the remote chance that neither of them is back. And I don't think that's going to come to pass. Let me make that clear. I think you're going to see one of these two quarterbacks return to the Broncos for the 2025 season. But it's interesting to look at the type of quarterbacks that Sean Payton has as his backups, because since Bridgewater, through Jameis Winston, through Jarrett Stidham, we've seen him favor quarterbacks who have pretty decent draft pedigrees. Jarrett Stidham was a 4th-round pick, but at one point, people were talking about him being a 1st-round pick. He was ballyhooed at one time. Quarterbacks that maybe need a little refinement but have some tools. Zach Wilson certainly qualifies as that, and that was certainly Jameis Winston and Teddy Bridgewater as well. They were, of course, 1st-round picks. And so that brings you to quarterbacks like Trey Lance, Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Kyle Trask, former 2nd-round pick of Tampa Bay, and dare I say Drew Lock, although I don't see it happening. But these, I think, are all second choices behind getting Stidham or Zach Wilson back, and I expect the more likely choice would be Jarrett Stidham coming back to the Broncos. Anyway, that's this Broncos Brain Dump talking about backup quarterbacks, Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, and whether one of them comes back or both of them come back, which I think is highly unlikely. Appreciate you watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Feel free to comment below. If you like it, tell your friends and share. If not, tell me. And you can keep the comments civil if you don't like it. And, I get a little goofy down here, but this is another Brain Dump. Thanks for watching. Thanks for putting up with me. And I'll be back with more as free agency gets closer. Talk about some more positions the Broncos are going to be looking at. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.